People who clean hoarders' houses. What's the most interesting thing you've found? Someday, my mom and I are going to have to clean out my grandma's house, and it will be the worst week of my life. Let me tell you a story to explain why. My story starts probably about 5 years ago. My family lives all over the country, and at the time I was working a crappy job, so I didn't have a lot of vacation time. My mom, sister and I all made it a point to coordinate one week in the summer where we would go visit my grandparents. So this one year, my mom and I decide to make dinner for Grammy and Grampy. We go to the grocery store to get ingredients. Everything my grandma has is canned, boxed, and half as old as I am. And as we're standing in the checkout line, I see those dessert flavored chewing gum they used to sell. I pointed out to my mom, who loves mint chocolate chip ice cream, and there was a mint chocolate chip flavored gum. She buys a pack, takes a piece, gives me a piece, gives Grammy a piece, and we all agree that it's pretty good. Fast forward a year, we're having our yearly trip to the grandparents. Mom is digging through her purse looking for something, and comes across that pack of gum. I said I really liked it, but I must not have liked it that much because I still have the whole pack. She laughs. Oh, yeah, I still have mine too, Grammy says. Mom and I glance at each other. You didn't buy any gum that day, Grammy. Grammy gets up and goes to the kitchen, and brings back a tiny piece of cardstock paper with a chewed piece of gum on it. On it is written gum given to me by Lori and dated. It lost its smell about a year ago, she tells mom and I. I only saw her throw it away last year. It stayed on her kitchen windowsill for upwards of 4 years. And that is why cleaning out the rest of her house is a time I am not looking forward to. I don't do it habitually, but I did once sign up for a group, and for 2 weeks we worked together to clean up this one hoarder lady's house and life. She was awesome. Every time we showed up we would get in a line and she would hug each of us enthusiastically. Anyway, I found a cardboard box full of glass shards from one of the downstairs windows, which we then repaired. The bottom of the box had rotted out, which I discovered upon lifting it. That wasn't pleasant. More interesting, however, was the creepy travel briefcase of mortician's tools. The lady was a retired funeral home owner. We brought it to her in case she wanted to keep it, and she waved a hand and sighed. Ah, the good old days, LOL. So odd to me that a hoarder would be so enthusiastic about this. A few of my relatives are hoarders, and if I even tried to clean 1 ounce of their houses they'd probably threaten to kill me. When my great-grandfather died they found a box labeled very small pieces of glass. It was literally full of small shards of broken glass. My grandmother was a hoarder and had largely abandoned the house my mother had grown up in. After filling it with junk, while attempting a big cleaning, my aunt found an inconspicuous bag of gravel and went to throw it out. She was stopped by my grandmother, who informed her that she was throwing out her father, who had died and been cremated decades earlier. After my great uncle Franny died a few years back, I agreed to help my dad clean his house out. Franny grew up in the Great Depression, so he never threw something away if it could be useful. Among other things, we found a collection of about 500 5-gallon buckets, countless burlap seed bags, and a cellar full of canned foods, some of which were up to 10 years old. I also found a full set of Pyrex bakeware, the good stuff made of actual borosilicate glass, and a bunch of craftsman tools. Ooh, Pyrex. I'm a 24-year woman but might as well be the stereotype of a 65-year cat lady. I love Pyrex sets. My grandma had a few pieces that we still have, but none are sets. I always thought this was just the chaos of losing, breaking, donating things through the years, but in looking back it was probably they just couldn't afford the whole set. Haha. Now they are like hipster gold. I used to be a house mover. Oftentimes, I would find old newspapers. Oldest one I have is 1910. I've got bottles from walls that are near 100 years old, but the best, hands down, Hoarder's house. And there's an 8-gauge black powder percussion cap shotgun. Talk about me giggling like a weirdo when I found it, with salvage rights and a PAL. I hit the fricking ceiling with glee. I've fired gravel, silverwares, marbles, gumballs and many other items from that shotgun. Probably my favorite so far. When I first moved to LA, I got a random job of helping a lady clean up her house. There were 15 of us and my jaw dropped on the first day. Boxes upon boxes of HSN purchases were stacked 7 feet high, everywhere. A guy that had arrived there first used a garden hoe to clear a pathway. This was in a very upscale neighborhood, Hancock Park, and from the outside you would have no clue of the nightmare that lay within. This woman bought hundreds of purchases every week and just let the boxes rot. The house was 2 stories and had 5 bedrooms and 5 baths. Every single room had been filled. Rats ran rampant through every nook and cranny. Each bathroom had been destroyed and the owner had placed black garbage bags in the toilets and they were overflowing with crap. It was straight out of a horror movie. I was sent upstairs to open windows and after my discovery they had to call in a hazmat team. The kitchen was filled from floor to the 10-foot ceiling with empty 2-liter Shasta bottles and pizza boxes. It was like some fricked up MoMA exhibit. There was literally no space left to move around. At one point sorting through the madness I found a receipt from HSN for over $100,000. It was printed out on this wide printer paper and about an inch thick. The lady ran out of space in the house and had moved out to the pool house. I don't know why, but this part creeped me out the most. The pool house was filled from floor to ceiling with plastic bags, stuffed into other plastic bags. I felt like I was going to have a panic attack. There was one hole carved out where the lady slept on an old lawn furniture cushion that had a wee pad on top. She had a small color TV plugged in and the housing of the TV was detached from the screen, yet still worked. We worked for 3 days straight and barely made any progress. I took pictures on my flip phone just to document. I threw out my clothes and shoes afterwards because the smell was so pungent in the house. The most ironic thing I found, buried under a mountain of trash, boxes and dead rats in the kitchen was a copy of the book, Clear Your Clutter with Feng Shui by Karen Kingston. I won the contest amongst the group for the funniest find. I never went back. I was too creeped out and they were paying us peanuts. Every now and then I think of the little cocoon she had carved out of plastic bags and I get the chills. This one isn't high up enough for how freaking insane that story is. I inherited my grandparents' house. My parents lived there also. Both generations lived through the Depression and saved stuff. Most interesting thing I found was in a metal box full of deeds written on blank lined steno paper like you would find in a steno notebook, with a dip pen. I live in Texas. It was brown and folded up. It was a land grant from the Republic of Texas, dated 1845, and signed by the last president of the Republic of Texas, Anson Jones. Pretty cool. I knew someone who was in the demolition business and he once found about $300,000 hidden in a wall. An old couple had lived in the home and died there and apparently hadn't gone out of the home in a long time. I know no one in this person's business got any of the money, and I don't know what happened to it from there. I'm sure the $30,000 made it to the proper authorities. Somewhat similar. So I was really broke at the time and looking for gigs on Craigslist. I saw one that said need moving help and it was really close by, so I was like, heck, sounds easy enough. I show up with a friend and we find out that it wasn't just any house. It was a foreclosed home. We were already there so we just went with it. We moved stuff all day from the upstairs part of the house. It smelled horrible. The place was a disaster. I was wearing gloves and a mask and I could just smell everything still. Anyways, at the top floor of the house there were weird Christian pictures and pictures of Jesus and angels and stuff everywhere. We also found a weird collection of Dale Earnhardt stuff. So these people were extremely religious NASCAR fans, I suppose. We found the weirdest protein bar I've ever seen. It was called a Bible bar. Thought that was pretty funny. So we finished clearing out all the stuff from the top floor. It felt like a lifetime. We were already so far in and these people we were working for were kind of strange, so we just kept going because we wanted the money. So it starts getting really bizarre when we go downstairs. The only way to go to the downstairs of the house was to go outside and go to the door at the main level. We found the most massive collection of Playboy Bunny and Penthouse magazines I've ever seen, and trust me, you wouldn't pick them up or even look at them. The room had a disgustingly weird vibe to it. There were candy wrappers literally embedded into the carpet. This home was vacated for like 10 years. We also found a bunch of Special Olympics medals. It was the worst $100 I ever earned, and we were paid by a guy in his 50s and his 30-something-year-old daughter who thought we didn't deserve $100 and tried giving $60 US for moving disgusting stuff out of a foreclosed home for 10 hours. Summary: house was filled with crazy amounts of Christian items, as well as Dale Earnhardt memorabilia. The lower floor of the house appeared to house their special needs son who was addicted to masturbating and eating candy. He was most likely locked in the room most of his time there. I cracked up at Bible bar for some reason. I wonder if you say body of Christ as you eat them gains. Every calendar from every year since 1910s, but organized by theme. Barns were all open on the wall. The 50s got the most prominent position. Wagons full of clocks. Newspapers all organized by dates. Mounds of aligned boxes. Then a perfect 6x6 space with the cleanest bed ever and military tucked corners. TBH with all the newspapers in date order. It seems more like archiving than hoarding. My grandmother is something of a hoarder. I think it has something to do with the mentality of growing up during the war. My relatives have worked to reduce the clutter, much to her disapproval. I was doing a couple of odd jobs for her one day about 3-4 years ago with my dad, and in her pantry I found tins of crab meat that expired in 1987. I'm almost certain that they'll still be in that pantry, and I expect that opening one would produce similar effects to opening the Ark of the Covenant. Her catchphrase is "It's alright, it's sealed." My folks had renters growing up and I was enlisted by my pops to help whenever someone moved out. I don't know if you know this, but people are gross and trashy. One house had been used as a daycare and all of the stuffed animals that got soiled weren't thrown away. They just tossed them down in the basement. So I was throwing these things out one of the vent windows down there and I noticed that the soiling on them was particularly smelly. It was crap. I put down the thing I'd been touching, went upstairs and washed myself with the driveway soap and the water from the cooler, all while retching. On the flip side, while cleaning out another property I found my first VHS porno, so I guess you win some and lose some. Volunteered once to clean out a dead hoarder's house and she had no family that wanted to claim anything in the house. Poor woman was only 39, which is an odd age for a hoarder since they are mostly over 45, to my knowledge. They told us we could take anything we found useful but were there mostly to clean. I lifted up a box and found some baby shoes, which was odd because no one ever mentioned she had kids. I asked the guy in charge of the project who had known her when she was alive and found it odd too, but then he remembered her telling him she had a miscarriage when she was 36. Kinda sad that the shoes were the only baby related thing that I found in that house, and it's even sadder that her hoarding started shortly after that. For sale. Baby shoes. Never worn. I lived with a hoarder. Long story. In one of her hoarded Cosmo magazines was a scratch-off sweepstakes card for a Virginia Slims contest. Grand prize was a Cadillac. Hoarder woman's scratch-off card was a grand prize winner. The contest had ended like 10 years earlier. We didn't tell her. Ouch, that was kind of you to not tell her. I don't clean hoarders' houses, but I've done work inside the houses of hoarders before. The thing is, there is so many piles of trash you are more concerned with navigating them properly to accurately account for everything in those piles or on those shelves, etc. My favorite was 2 boxes of cereal from around 1999. I saw this in October 2016. The thing that caught my eye were the Fruity Flakes, but they also had some type of like Y2K Cheerios that I had never seen before. I have been working building demo with my dad for about 5 years, usually old grain elevators and farmhouses. One day we get a call from the state health department that there is a mandatory cleanup we have to do because they had let us slide on some minor issues and nobody wanted to do the job. So we show up to see the place. This 70-ish-year-old man who is legally blind has 3 trailer houses full of children's toys and newspapers mostly, 12 cat houses for about 50 cats. Town ordinance states there can only be I think 4 cats per household max, and a few more sheds here and there. He didn't have a yard because everything within his tree line was covered in garbage, and I mean literal garbage. Cardboard boxes and paper products primarily. Also, his sewage didn't work for like 5 years, so he would crap in 5-gallon buckets until they were full, then carry them outside about 15 feet from his front door and just leave them outside. About 50 of those buckets outside. We hauled literally 120 US tons of newspaper, toys, building materials, and human crap to the landfill. Most of the cats ran away and became strays, but I heard a few in the buildings after we began demolition. Altogether was not a pleasant experience. Dirtiest job I have ever done. And we also do sewage work on occasion. On the plus side, on the final day, I found a ring box with 4 24-karat Black Hills silver rings in it, and part of our contract states that all salvage is ours, which basically means we get to keep anything interesting and unplanned for. So that was cool. Never price them out because it makes for an interesting story, and that is worth more than the rings themselves in my opinion. Deep cleaned them, of course, smelled like cat pee when I found them. TLDR. Hauled 120 tons of newspaper, children's toys, building materials, and human crap out of a blind man's yard. Found some silver rings I got to keep after cleaning. Makes for a good story. Oh man. When I was 14, my first job was with a cleaning company. My second assignment was a hoarder's house. The owner had died and the family needed to clean up the property. Among the things we found, 1,000 pairs of donated eyeglasses that were supposed to go to charity. 2. Newspapers from the 1960s in stacks of hundreds. 3. A bed that had collapsed under the weight of hundreds of boxes. 4. A pile of cat skeletons in the barn. 5. Several thousand empty cans. The whole job took a staff of about 10 several months to complete. We called it the House of Horrors. So gross and definitely not worth the $6 HR I got for it. When my grandfather died, my family and I cleaned his house, more like just his room. It was my aunt and uncle who hoarded, and right after my family cleaned his room, they filled it back up again. But I found a vintage 100W electric guitar amp from the late 60s or early 70s. Sounds wonderful and has a really nice reverb to it. We inherited my wife's grandmother's house. It was a mess. You could see the path on the carpet where they walked because there was so much stuff in the house. The home was built in the 70s and I swear everything that crossed the threshold never left. I found a shoebox full of tags that you get from shirts that tell you the size dating back to the mid 80s. Found 2 cans of used cooking oil sitting in the cabinet because I don't know, and an unopened bottle of Pepsi with a Super Bowl 18 logo. Dust inches thick where she hadn't been in years. It was amazing to see how the dust got thicker and you could tell where they gave up cleaning up first. The best thing we found was almost $10,000 hidden all over the house. We used the money to pay the property tax, install new carpet and a new water system. Those of you that use wells know what I'm talking about. Took us 4 months to clean up. I'm betting that Pepsi is worth a pretty penny today, especially seeing as how it's unopened. When my grandpa died, we cleaned out his house. All in all, we emptied 8 of those industrial-sized dumpsters out of his house, plus made countless trips to the dump to get rid of things that couldn't go in the dumpster. Strangest thing was his chemical shed. He was a pear farmer from about the 40s to the 90s. When you opened the door, the smell hit you instantly, and after a breath or two you felt lightheaded. We left and came back with protective gear later. It was full of pesticides and other chemicals, most of which now illegal like DDT, that over the years had dissolved their cans and mixed into a terrible concoction. They used some terrible chemicals back in that time. My dad told us a story about one time his dad sprayed with whatever new thing was out that year without following all of the safety instructions. He came back vomiting and didn't stop for almost a week. All of his hair and fingernails fell out. The hair never grew back. They were intense and used widely with little environmental concern. Crazy stuff. I decided to move out of my mother's house and into my grandparents' house because I wanted more freedom but didn't have the money to support myself. My Ukrainian grandparents are hoarders in a 2-bedroom house, and they filled up the room that my uncle, their son, moved out of with stuff. After cleaning it out, I found 5 950ml bottles of Aereo alcohol that my grandpa bought when he went to Mexico. When I asked my grandpa about it, he said it was medicine. I used to work as tidy up man, German speaker, sorry for strange words sometimes, and saw a lot of really strange things in houses, which had to be normal for the people. Maybe the behavior is considered as illness, but it's really strange anyways. so the people were already dead when we cleaned the houses. I was younger back then and I forgot to make pictures. It was 10 years ago. The newspaper couple, an old couple, lived in a small flat and the only thing they did was to sort and organize the free newspapers you find in front of your door. But they had a special way to do it. They cutted every headline, every picture out of a bunch of these newspapers and put them into ring folders. They did for over 40 years. We found papers from the 70s. Every wall in the flat were ring folders. But because at some point they didn't manage to do it right, they started to put the newspapers they still have to do on the floor. The floor in the entire flat was full of newspapers up to 50 centimeters. In their basement we found a small box of plastic filled with stones, sand and water. It was labeled Scoured and Pack 1968. In German this hits the humor my college and I had, and we still giggle about that Abjekotstandiengepact. The bottle lady. She was a retired gynecologist and lived in her old doctor's office. The interior was from the 70s and there was everything like in a normal doctor's office. But she lived in this thing with no bed, no kitchen. She slept on a couch in the waiting room. The only non-doctor's office thing was a TV she placed there. In the laboratories was a fridge she also used. She was an alcoholic and drank gin only and brought the same small bottle from a small supermarket. But she didn't throw the empty bottles away. She placed them all over the doctor's office, her home, everywhere. Gin bottles on every surface. Mountains of gin bottles. She only had a small path from the door to the couch, to the TV, to the toilet and the fridge. I like your strange words. Thank you. We bought a hoarder house. A set of helmets. Nazi, SS, Japanese, and British from World War II, and World War I British. They were wrapped in brown paper in a decomposing box we almost threw out without going through it. Money in random places, tucked in old cards, between plates, in old socks, so we couldn't throw anything away without inspecting it carefully. Diamond engagement ring. About 3,000 bars of soap. The attic will always smell like soap. Cut crystal wine glasses given as a wedding present in 1945 and never used. Note included on the box. The house was like a 1950s time capsule, so we took out canned food, clothes, books, you name it, going back to that time. It took 4 months and 3 semi-sized dumpsters to get it cleaned out. How much did you get for the good stuff and did you donate the soap? Cleaning up my hubby's grandparents' house when they needed to be placed in full-time care. 30 years worth of used old toilet brushes, and about 100 pairs of worn women's underwear. It took 2 of us 3 days to clear out a European laundry. On the 4th toilet brush, I heard my mill swear for the first time. I thought of another one that was crazy. Homeowner's name was Tom, so we privately called him Peeping Tom. In his basement he had stacks of those cheap plastic drawer organizers. There were about 20 drawers filled with various types of women's underwear. Mind you, this guy was 70 years old, never married, and worked as a residential plumber. I'm pretty sure he stole underwear from the houses he worked at. My mother cleaned out her great aunt's home after she died. Not really a hoarder, just accumulated clutter throughout the house. At one point nearly threw away this giant stack of papers only to realize they were Dow Chemical stock certificates. Cashed those in for a nice chunk of change. Not my story. My university CSI lecturers, a massively overweight, bedridden woman and her husband were hoarders. She fell out of bed and because of all the crap, couldn't get up. Her continued feed her as was. What neither of them knew was that maggots started eating her from underneath. She eventually died and her was jailed for negligence. It's stories like this that suddenly put your own life into perspective. I feel like I'm going through a tough time right now, but this kind of thing makes me realize I can't even imagine the horror of some people's existence. When I worked as a home care provider we had a few hoarders. They'd go absolutely bananas if you tried throwing stuff away, so we did what we could, as well as the duties we were there for: cooking, laundry, bed making, all of which are stories in themselves considering we had to do that in the middle of the hoarder piles. Anyway, while working I found a collection of old diapers. I was not allowed to throw them out. Some really old pee mags, vintage, some really old wine, in mint condition, a mummified cat, The lady was happy that I had found him, cause she was worried he had run out and gotten hit by a car. Being mummified in the middle of everything was apparently better. Also, since I had found the cat, she allowed me to clean some more since I was a good girl who didn't throw stuff away. I threw so much away, but didn't tell her. Poor woman probably had a horror story playing in her head for years of her beloved pet getting run over. She was so relieved it wasn't true. She couldn't see the mummy as equally terrible. Pictures with famous individuals like Elvis and MLK. Also, enough rats and cockroaches to fill the entire ceiling with mounds and mounds of steamy goodness. I worked for someone cleaning out hoarder houses for about a year. My most interesting find was the homeowner's husband's ashes. She told us to keep an eye out for it, but I had no idea what to look for. They ended up being in a small cardboard box, with the ashes bagged inside them. I found them buried below years of magazines. It was pretty funny celebrating the find. We rescued my cat from a hoarder's house. The woman died and my friends had to clean it up in order to sell it. The woman printed out every single email she ever received, even spam. The craziest thing they found was Tiffany jewelry and soup cans. They had to go through everything for fear they were throwing something valuable away. Story time. My mom was a compulsive shopper. When she died in 2009, we realized the extent of the problem. Her basement was stacked to the ceiling with things from home shopping networks. We found 20 years of receipts and drawers from her retirement to pay off her credit card debt. The shopping networks hone in on lonely PPL and it's about getting them to buy new things. I think we were shocked to find she had spent about $150,000 over 20 years on junk. She died $40,000 in credit card debt, got a second mortgage on her house, and almost no savings. The auto pay packages kept coming for months after she died, and none of us wanted any of her treasures, the vast majority of which was still in wrappers or boxes. It was insane. I think she wore things 2-3 times and moved on. 6 still packed versions of the same movie. A 70s or 80s version of a CO2 gun that looked like a real target pistol. An M79 grenade, no powder in it so it's legal. A 3-sided bayonet that is apparently made so any wounds made with it won't close. A ton of metals from Vietnam. And a report from an incident in Vietnam where the hoarder left the helicopter he was piloting to pull a downed pilot out of his jet. Saved the guy's life turns out. I had granduncles and aunts who were hoarders from the Depression era. One of them collected money in series, by serial number that is. Other old paper money, stuffed between old newspapers, stacked all over the house, with aisles between the stacks. I received a stack of bills about 6 inches tall. So and I actually just started cleaning a hoarder's nest, and amongst the filth and mold, my best find has been a stack of diamond wedding rings. My mom was pretty surprised when I returned it to her. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.